Hi again. So I'm going to go straight back to that paragraph that I just read on the last section, and I'm hoping that I've made some more space on my phone. So we are just at the top of page 39, where it's about the fourth sentence down. He was small, as I've said, and I was struck besides with the shocking expression of his face. In this one, it is just at the bottom of page 97, just here, he was small, as I've said, and I was struck with the shocking expression of his face. So I know I've read it, but I'm just going to explain it to you because there's a lot of quite verbose vocabulary in there, big words. So he starts, this is Lanyon, okay? I need you to write on a post-it note that what he's trying to do is he's trying to give a clinical account of what is odd about Mr. Hyde. So you need to write that on a post-it note. He's trying to give a clinical kind of doctor's description of his physical appearance as to why he's odd. He's struggling. He's using some very big, verbose scientific words. And the reason that's quite important is that later on in this chapter, he is so shocked by what he sees that he's unable to use his kind of scientific, logical brain, which is what he's trying to do here. So he says, he was small, as I've said. I was struck besides with the shocking expression of his face. So I've highlighted and underlined that. It's genuinely a shock to him, trying to explain then what is wrong with his face. It says, with his remarkable combination of great muscular activity and great apparent debility of constitution. So he seems to be two things all at once. He seems to have a very pronounced muscular structure to his face, but at the same time he has some kind of debility, which implies something wrong with his face. So he's not strong, muscular and good looking. He's this weird combination of very muscular and yet something wrong with his constitution, with his being, his face and everything. So please highlight these bits that I'm picking out, and you can annotate as you think best. I've got quite a lot written on this section. I've got lots of bits coming off. I don't have a lot of room in this book. You've got a lot more in this one. And if you're not writing on any book, you're post-it noting, it might be worth putting a couple of post-it notes on this particular section. Okay, so he's muscular activity, debility of constitution. And last but not least, with the odd subjective disturbance caused by his neighbourhood. So he starts off by trying to say his face is weird, and then he says, and the other thing that gives me the EBGBs, basically, is my reaction to him. So when he says caused by his neighbourhood, it means by being close to him, the way that I feel is something I need to explain. So he goes on to say, he's now explaining how he feels, how Lanyon is feeling by being close to this man. This bore some resemblance to insipid rigour, which is like a stiffening, so he suddenly finds himself kind of paralysed, and was accompanied by a marked sinking of the pulse. So the sinking of the pulse is almost like he notices his heart rate dropping as if he's frightened. And if you think about, I would use the expression to say, have a sinking feeling. So that particular description there, the sinking of the pulse, I would highlight that and put that it feels very much like he's frightened and he's in a bit of shock there. Now, at the time, he says, at the time, which kind of implies that later on he comes back to revisit this thought, I set it down to some idiosyncratic personal distaste. Now, idiosyncratic means a mode of behaviour that's personal to an individual. So we all have idiosyncrasy. So mine is doing things like this in my hand. So my idiosyncrasy is the fact that I use my hands to gesticulate a lot. He's saying that he's putting down his sudden stiffening and his sinking of his pulse to a personal dislike of this man, that there's nothing bigger than that. And merely wondered at the acuteness of the symptoms. So again, he's using scientific medical doctor terms to try and describe his own physical reaction to Hyde. Acute means very, very close together and noticeable symptoms. So he's describing his reactions as symptoms. He goes on to continue though, but I have since had reason to believe the cause to lie much deeper in the nature of man. Please highlight that. And actually that needs to go in your little booklet of quotations, that needs to go on your Lanyon page. Because what he's saying is, well, to start with, I just thought he was a bit weird looking and it was just me and I just took a personal dislike to this guy. But later on I found that it was much deeper in the nature of man. And he's talking about mankind. This is a big concept to do with humanity that he's talking about. And to turn on some nobler hinge than the principle of hatred. So I've also highlighted this line here, that just there with the little star, because he's basically saying that the reason he has such an acute reaction to Hyde is actually something, an instinct inside him as a human, which actually is nobler than just hatred. It's actually something that he's recognised, his human body has recognised something terrible in Hyde. So that's why he describes it as nobler. than just hatred. It isn't that he just hates him. There is a really good reason for him to have this physical reaction to Mr. Hyde. Okay, so frog in my throat. Okay, I've got cold tea over here, which I'm just going to have a little drink of. It's like my mug. Totally inappropriate. There we go. I'll probably get in trouble for that. Anyway. Right, so I'm going to carry on now. So you guys in this edition, you're now on to page 98, okay? How many minutes have I got? So I've used 5 and I've got 10 in total, so I've got 5 more minutes. I'll probably need one more part to get this one done. This person, remember he doesn't know he's called Hyde yet. The sun's just getting in my eyes now. This person, who had thus, from the first moment of his entrance, struck in me what I can only describe as a disgustful curiosity. Please highlight that. I'm going to highlight that. Was dressed in a fashion that would have made an ordinary person laughable. His clothes, that is to say, although they were of rich and sober fabric, were enormously too large for him in every measurement. So can you please highlight rich and sober fabric and then enormously too large? So he looks ridiculous. The trousers hanging on his legs and rolled up to keep them from the ground, the waist of the coat below his haunches, and the collar sprawling wide upon his shoulders. Strange to relate, this ludicrous accoutrement was far from moving me to laughter. So, I've got ludicrous accoutrement because to use the word ludicrous means completely insane. Like, he looks like a lunatic. Remember, we've had lots of references to madness so far. But it doesn't move him to laughter. So, even though it's completely insane, he doesn't laugh. Rather, as there was something abnormal and misbegotten in the very essence of the creature that now faced me, something seizing, surprising, and revolting. This fresh disparity seemed but to fit in with and to reinforce it, so that to my interest in the man's nature and character there was added a curiosity as to his origin, his life, his fortune, and status in the world. So, go back. You need to circle abnormal and misbegotten and the word creature, and you need to put those 3 words. You can put the whole sentence if you want onto your Mr. Hyde page. So it's described as abnormal, so completely the opposite of normal. Misbegotten, as if there's something very other about him, so he doesn't fit into any form of culture, social standing, anything like that. And the fact that he's used the word creature, obviously that's got really easy word level analysis written all over it, the fact that he seems not human. Now this is important because the second part of the thing that I'm going to ask you to do this week is actually do a bit of an extract work where you're going to have to do some word level analysis and do some squid paragraphs for me. So words like creature are going to be very useful to you because it implies that he's not human. Okay. You then need to circle the verbs that describe seizing, surprising, and revolting to describe how he feels about Hyde. So the last bit is that all of this added together, that last sentence where it says, my interest in the man's nature and character, there was added a curiosity as to his origin, his life, his fortune, and his status in the world. He's like, where the hell has this guy come from? Why is he wearing these clothes? Why is he so hideous? Is he rich? Is he poor? Is he English? Where's he come from? So many questions. So Lanyon has got just more questions than anything else. These observations, though they have taken so great a space to be set down in, were yet the work of a few seconds. My visitor was indeed on fire with sombre excitement. So even though it's just taken him a whole page to explain all of that, it all happened very quickly, is what he's saying. Have you got it? He cried. Have you got it? And so lively was his impatience that he even laid his hand upon my arm and sought to shake me. I put him back, conscious at his touch of a certain icy pang along my blood. Please highlight the icy pang. Come, sir, said I, you forget that I have not yet the pleasure of your acquaintance. Be seated, if you please. And I showed him an example, and sat down myself in my customary seat, and with as fair an imitation of my ordinary manner to a patient as the lateness of the hour, the nature of my preoccupations, and the horror I had of my visitor would suffer me to muster. So he's trying to pretend he's like an ordinary doctor. Come in, sit down, patient. So you've got doctor-patient chair. And he's trying to act like it's normal when actually it's not normal at all. I beg your pardon, Dr. Lanyon, he replied civilly enough. Sorry, I got post-its all over the place here. Let me just get rid of this one. I'm not doing a very good job of this one. I beg your pardon, Dr. Lanyon, he replied civilly enough. What you say is very well founded, and my impatience has shown its heel to my politeness. I come here at the insistence of your colleague, Dr. Henry Jekyll, on a piece of business of some moment, and I understand. He paused and put his hand to his throat, and I could see, in spite of his collected manner, that he was wrestling against the approaches of the hysteria. Please highlight that line. So, wrestling against the approaches of the hysteria. So he's trying to talk in a polite way, and I like the verb wrestling there. But here I took pity on my visitors. Running out of time. I'm going to stop there at the end of that hysteria. Okay.